Gino's been able to operate. We saw it last year, and now there's more answers than he had, and they're getting into less of the long third downs than they've done under Waldron. I think Grubb's done a good job early on. So you know what? I'm actually going to flip my pick. We need three different ones. I'll go Seahawks here instead of Lions.
All right, guys, welcome back to Establish the Pass podcast presented by Clutch Points. I'm your host, Blake Lovell. With me, as always, my co-host, Dillon Reagan, back here to make our picks for Week 4 in the 2024 NFL season. At this point, Dillon, the hashtag has got to be out there. Fade, Establish the Pass, because, man, we're probably not the only ones. What a wild 3 weeks it's been so far. And, of course, it all just kind of culminated in just a wacky Week 3 where you just had so many teams that were winless, finally sort of get off the schneid. The underdogs reign supreme, it seems, so far in the NFL.
Yeah, would not have. There's some wild things like the Bengals and Jags. I mean, even if you didn't think the Jags are going to win the division, I don't think we picked them to make the playoffs. But if you told me they're going to be 0-3, I would have had a hard time believing it. Same with the Bengals. I mean, the Bengals offense, not the problem. They didn't punt or turn the ball over last game, right? But yeah, it's been kind of a wild, still early part of the season where we're starting to really still understand what some of these teams that have started hot are. How good are they really? Teams that have not, is this what it's really going to look like the whole season? And there is really a large amount in that middle point, right? There's only 3, I think, 0-3 teams left. After you mentioned, six teams that were 0-2 won last week. 3 fell down to 0-3. I think there's 5 undefeated teams, and then most teams, right, the whole other 3/4 of the whole league are 1-2 and 2-1. So everyone's just kind of still figuring it out. Still, with so many teams now adopting the not playing in the preseason, their starters, you're seeing some sloppiness at times. But I think especially some of the offensive performances from every team on Monday night except the Jags, you did see some things start coming together, and excited for another week where maybe we'll just gain some more intel. Hopefully we can get back on track. I think our overall picks totals are in the middle of looking at compared to other folks. I think we're not too crazy here. A lot of people are missing some of these games because there's been some unexpected results. Maybe we'll get a good week. I think week 1 we really were strong, came out of the gates hot, and then it's been a struggle the last 2. Maybe we'll get back on track here.
Well, because of that, picking more underdogs this week than usual. I will say that up front because I just think that's the nature of where the NFL is right now with some of these teams, and still trying to figure out exactly where they stand. All right, as always, we go to our games of the week to start things off here. We do have 2 this week, and actually probably could have qualified having a third or maybe even a fourth when you look at some of these games. But we start with the Vikings at the Packers. Packers are 2.5-point favorites in this game in Lambeau. And, of course, the biggest story is going to be the likely return, it seems, as it stands now, of Jordan Love, the quarterback for the Packers, which it's not make that huge of a difference given what they've accomplished with him out. But I think now you look at it from this standpoint, a big game for the Packers, of course, playing the surprise team in the NFL so far in the Vikings. I know Sam Darnold been dealing with an injury, but Dillon, I mean, this is, again, kind of turned into a must-see showdown between these two teams. And I guess I'll just keep doing what seemingly a lot of us have done this season, and that's just keep betting against the Vikings, even though it's not been the smartest move. But I think I'm going to put a little more trust in the Packers here in this spot in Lambeau, just given what's at stake here.
Yeah, I think the fact they're at Lambeau can make a difference, obviously getting Jordan Love back, but the confidence this team has to have in what they can do no matter what happens with the last 2 weeks. I know, depending on what your thoughts are on the Titans and Colts, and obviously they've won one, they're 1-5 so far. That's partially because of, they faced a Green Bay team that came in. Maybe they thought, oh, wow, we got a break here. No Jordan Love. And then next thing you know, they're running the football a million times at a ridiculously efficient rate. The defense has stepped up and made enough plays. Obviously the pick 6 by Jair last week. You wonder, I know some people are pointed out, hey, when Sam Darnold was in Carolina, they started 3-0 and things kind of fell off. I do think there's a difference to what Sam Darnold's doing and the coaching here in Minnesota that should be credited, and overall the talent that he has, with Justin Jefferson. Obviously, as long as that guy's on the field, it's going to be hard to bet against them putting up some points. It's really the flip side where it's like this Vikings defense has come out. I mean, I know they were great last year with the talent that they had. A lot was made of the job Flores did, but I mean, they've kind of ramped it up to another level where you have CJ Stroud on the sideline shaking his head. I know in his early career that hasn't happened too much. So, I don't have my actual pick lined up here because that's why this is our top billing game of the week. I do feel like this division, these two teams in Detroit, we talked a lot about the NFC North, and then we mentioned the NFC or the AFC North is the best division, and then mentioned the NFC West and the NFC North were kind of like the next ones. But at this point, three teams that really look like true playoff contenders and potentially more. You think about how well the Packers offense was playing before Jordan Love got hurt in week 1 and what that could mean with everything else that they did this week. Oh man, I'm going to go with the Packers, but I don't like it. I still feel like this, it'll be a little different. I think when we see Flores and this defensive scheme go against, we don't have a ton of guys that are super experienced QBs at this moment, right? There's like that vacuum of, you have the kind of tier of guys that are coming in the league at the similar timing of Mahomes and Josh Allen. Then you have a younger group, and then you don't really have as many older guys like Aaron Rodgers or Matthew Stafford. I do think I'm curious to see when I know the Rams at least play the Vikings later this year to see how they decipher that and go through it. Jordan Love obviously has got to sit and watch for a while. But still curious how he's going to, this is not the easiest scheme to come back after missing 2 games and be facing versus, last time was a Philly defense slipping all over the place on that turf in Brazil. So it might be, I might come to regret this, but I think the quality of play, the offensive line play, the tight end play, just everything that the Packers have kind of brought on that side and the physicality. I think what we've seen is, a lot of when there's teams that are being a little complicated and kind of trying to confuse you, sometimes the solution is just running the rock. And I think the Green Bay right now is doing it at as efficient of a clip, the top 7 in DVOA for rushing the ball. But I know a lot of the success rate numbers and different things show that this team has been dominant on the ground. And I think that is the part of this matchup where I do think ultimately could be the biggest difference that gets them to a Minnesota defense that has been great defending the run. They've been able to do it despite some of these different alignments that are taking away explosives and confusing QBs, but it should be a lot of fun. There's a reason it's one of our games of the week here, right?
Yeah, and there's also a reason why this one is too, and that is, of course, the Ravens and the Bills are going to clash in Baltimore. Ravens are 2.5-point favorites in this game, and I think this is one that, again, we knew coming into the season these should be 2 of the best teams in the AFC, if not the entire NFL. The last 2 meetings they've had, Buffalo's won both and were able to, 23-20, 17-3, those 2 games played in 21 and 22. And so I think that to me is what I look at here. And there's a reason I brought those scores up because, those are ones that were games seemingly, especially that first one, right? It was controlled by the defense. And I think, I'm curious to see what Buffalo can do against the Ravens here. Which I think there's probably still some frustration for the Ravens on the offensive side, especially if you're a Mark Andrews fantasy owner, Dylan. Not to, bring on any frustrations here of my own, but still, again, they sort of did what they had to do, and I think that's kind of what it comes down to, able to get the win 28-25 against the Cowboys, even though Dallas certainly made it interesting at the end there. But I don't know. I said I'm going to stick with kind of the same theme. I think the Bills are just – remember, we were having those conversations in July and August, and people were like, man, what's it going to look like for the Bills? Because all the weapons are gone for Josh Allen and all this other stuff. But I'll tell you what it's looked like. It looks just fine. So I'm going to take a shot at picking the Bills on the road here against the Ravens. I don't know why, Dylan. It's just something about the Ravens right now that I'm still – interested in seeing more. Again, that was kind of a must-win game because we know what happens when you go to 0-3, and of course they've already lost to that game to the Raiders. It may just sort of scratch your head. Lost in week 1 at the buzzer to the Chiefs, but I don't know. I still think it's going to be interesting to see what happens from here with the Ravens, and I just have more confidence in the Bills right now. Yeah,
the Bills aren't just winning these games, right? They're taking it to teams that at least in the preseason had playoff aspirations. We'll see, right now with Miami and Jacksonville, things have kind of gone downhill. And obviously in week 1, Arizona has ended up being a better team than maybe some folks thought. And they are also aided by a kick return. So overall, the Bills, the offense has been, no matter who they faced, real efficient. And I know it's going to be a tougher test potentially here in Baltimore, but this defense for the Ravens isn't quite looking like some of the past units we talked about in the, in our lead up to the season, some of the turnover they've had on that side, the same way you talk about with the Bills and their offense and some of the weapons. Like you said, it doesn't look like an issue. This is through the first 3 weeks, the number one DVOA offense in the league. And it's not just they have the same kind of DVOA adjusted for variation early. So like when teams look really good early on, how do we think over the course of the season? So they kind of have this stat, Dave, that you use to look at, all right, this is what's happened, but also let's look at our still projections, kind of meld those together. And that shows a story also, which is why this is our game of the week, or one of our games of the week. The Ravens, despite their 1-2 start, are number 2 there, and the Bills are number 1. So we're talking about 2 of the top teams so far and expected to be moving forward in the entire league. The offense for the Ravens has not been an issue overall, but they have had, the moments against the Raiders where they could have put them away. Things stalled. Moments early in the Chiefs game before they got going where things didn't look great. And then late in the game against Dallas. So it's that inconsistency that we're seeing with the Ravens that I think is part of it. I think it's just the vibes of Buffalo could not be higher. Obviously, when you win by a lot of points, it's things we'll see. I think they'll respond fine when they do ultimately get knocked off at some point coming up. Right now with the way they've played against the Ravens, like you mentioned, the way that Josh is playing by sliding and not taking maybe some of the hits that we've seen him always be willing to take the last few weeks. Just the sheer efficiency of the attack and how balanced it is, and some of the just smart things and ways that they're converting. Love that little swing pass to I believe it was Shakir on a fourth down early in the game against Jacksonville, where it's like no one's there, and they've used this play before, and it's just like it's easy stuff. It's the solutions. I mean, since Brady's taken over, I think they're 8-1 or something. Going back to last season, obviously. Couple of plays here and there against the Chiefs, that game goes different in the playoffs. So, man, the Bills, I said it immediately after not picking them to win division. Like before even week 1, I was like, if I could switch that back, I would, because I have a feeling they're going to look pretty good, and I didn't know they'd look this good. So, I think right now this is still going to be a close game. There's a reason that, despite their early season success, the Ravens are still favored. I think there's a good respect for what they've been able to do so far, and won't be shocked if Baltimore pulls it off. But I do think the Bills offense has some answers for a Ravens defense that hasn't looked quite as good through the early going as last year for sure. But also on the flip side, I think the Bills defense, despite all the injuries they've had early on already, Von Miller looks great. It just looks like a team that I think is going to come firing, and it should be a really entertaining Sunday night game.
Yep, I think so too. I think this is one that will absolutely deliver. Curious to see who wins out in this one for sure. We know how much the Ravens probably feel like they need this game based on where they're at right now. All right. To our betting locks, which you might as well just say, betting locks in terms of like the opposite. Like anything we say, just do the opposite at this point. The George Costanza rule, because it has not been pretty. Like we tried to fade the bad teams, and that did not work last week. I went for some reason, as I said, I picked the Raiders to be the betting lock, and look what that got me. They got the Panthers and Andy Dalton going in and just taking it to the Raiders. That did not work out too well. Who was yours last week, Dylan?
I had the Bucks beating
straight
the Broncos.
To the Broncos. So
I got week 2. I forget what it was, but I've got at least one. That's it. Oh, I had the Panthers losing the last the Charger game. That was my one win here with the locks.
Yeah, well, we won't bring up my week 2 performance with the Cowboys and the Saints on that one, but we're going to try to get back on track here. Although I can't say that I am confident, but I'm going to go to this one, which is, it seems like usually when we do our betting locks, we try to go for those numbers that are usually at least a field goal or higher, as you're going to do here. But I did not. I decided to go with probably one of my lowest picks in terms of betting locks ever with the number. The Steelers are 1.5 point favorites on the road in Indianapolis to play the Colts. And yes, the team that I said coming into the season, and I said time and time again, I picked them to finish last in this division. I just do not think that's the case anymore. I think there's a couple other contenders for that role. One maybe more predictably so than the other. But I like what I've seen from the Steelers. How can you not to this point? Justin Fields and what he's been able to do in terms of just playing a clean game, being what they need to be offensively while letting their defense do their thing. And that to me is why I'm going to this as my betting lock. Rarely do I pick a road favorite of less than a field goal in this spot like this to cover and call it a betting lock. But I just think the Steelers defense against Anthony Richardson is advantage Steelers defense. And we've still seen some of those inconsistent plays from Richardson at this point. And I think a couple of those mistakes are all the Steelers need to get to the Arthur Smith special of running the ball, getting up early. And if that happens against what I think they can still score points against this Colts defense, I just think the Steelers are the better choice. So, of course, put all your money in on the Colts at this point.
The cycle of the league is playing right into the Steelers' hands. Stop the run and run the ball with efficiency. And yeah, they've done that better than most teams. That don't let the Colts' success against the Bears rush offense fool you. This still is a run defense that has a lot to be asked of. That I think Pittsburgh's gonna be able to have some efficiency. Where on the flip side, the way that Jonathan Taylor found some of those holes last week, and we have seen Richardson, like you said, up and down play. It's just we've seen some of the mistakes that at times, especially with Fields, he's getting the ball out really quickly. I know Mina Kimes and some other folks have talked about just how good he's looked, but just those straight up stats. Like, this is not something that was happening in Chicago that is right now a major step in his ability to read, react, not just try to extend every single play. Often, finding answers quicker, and then if he's not, just taking off, not trying to just buy time to go. And so overall, also the design run game that Pittsburgh's got going, it's been a lot of fun to watch that team. And it's even though some of the advanced numbers for running haven't been insanely efficient, one of the borderline top 10 DVOA passing offense. I mean, that's just a credit to some of these guys that have stepped up outside of George Pickens. Austin has been great. Obviously had the one breakaway touchdown there to put the game away against the Chargers, but they've just found different ways. And look, it's been more fun than I maybe thought it might be going into the season. I know they've had some injuries along the offensive line, but still a group that we talked about the draft picks and what Frazier's looked like. And it's been a lot of fun watching this team. I just think that physicality up front on that side versus the Colts front is a major advantage. Maybe the Colts will get some things going offensively, but I just have a tough time believing in it until I see it. So I mentioned to you, this was a game that I considered as a betting lock too. It's maybe a lack of confidence in what the Colts looked like for the first few weeks, and how I'm concerned what we saw against the Bears won't really fly in this game, at least at least for the Colts defense in this case. And it's just the flip side. I think it's just not the best matchup for Indianapolis's offense. So I think the Steelers get it done, and if they get it done, they're probably winning by at least 2 points. So I feel pretty good about that too. The best part of football season? Checking out the post-game stats. Which wideouts scored 2 touchdowns or more? Which QBs threw for more than 300 yards? Think you can pick who will do what before kickoff? Then play Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, select between 2 and 6 players, and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. It's that simple. For all first-time Pick 6 players, check this out. New customers play $5 on your first pick set, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code ESTABLISH. That's code ESTABLISH for new customers to play $5 on your first pick set, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Steelers by a field goal or more here. So give me the Steelers on the road in Indianapolis. All right. Oh boy, Dylan, this is one of these setups for your betting lock that we've seen before here, and yes. I hate to tell you, picking the Cowboys as your betting lock has not gone well for one of us so far this season. But you're going to try to turn the tide here, as the Cowboys are 5.5 point favorites on the road against the Giants. The G-Man coming off a big win in Cleveland against the Browns, but Yeah, I'm going to pick the Cowboys to win the game, but I've got to stay away from them in terms of betting locks based on that game against the Saints. The good news for the Cowboys, I think, is that the Giants are not as good as the Saints, and that should be something where you feel like the Giants kind of have to come back to where they actually are, and you feel like the Cowboys, again, they lost that game to Baltimore, have had some very disappointing performances early in the season. This is one of those that we always say is like a get right game, and you feel like that could absolutely be the case for the Cowboys here, because if it's not, you have bigger issues there in Arlington.
Yeah, it came down to, for the lock part of this thing, and just real quick, I know we didn't do a recap of the last week's, but like obviously Neighbors is insane, and there's a lot of good things to happen there, where it's nice to have an option where if Daniel Jones, no one's open, just throw it up to him, and at the very least, he'll probably knock it away from the defender. As we saw, he might moss the guy. So there are some concerns there, but I just think that the structure of this Cowboys defense that has been absolutely destroyed on the ground with an offensive line that has been rebuilt, but still isn't by any means a top end unit. And without a guy like Saquon that can take those openings and be the difference between a 4-yard run and a 50-yard run potentially with some of the plays he's been making with the Eagles so far when he gets a crease. I just think they're not designed exactly to exploit where Dallas's defense is just really far behind right now. On the other side, I think Dak's made some good plays, but overall some things have been lacking with the creativity in that passing game. I think they're going to be able to at least buy some time. I know the Giants defensive front pretty solid last week, but I still have a hard time believing they're going to be able to just completely run past some of these guys in Dallas. I think Dallas will get some things going on offense. I don't think it's going to be the prettiest game. And I don't think the Giants, they're not forgetting what happened last year. Maybe that's partially why I'm also not forgetting it. That's partially why I had this lock. There are two games, the Cowboys outscoring them 89-17 last year. I don't think it's going to be maybe on that level, but I just have the reminders of how dominant Micah Parsons and the Cowboys looked chasing Daniel Jones. And again, I don't think there's enough moves you could have made in an offseason to completely offset on both sides with some of the overhaul in both in Dallas too, to really offset that. I just think this mismatches that are looking at the, as I mentioned to you before, I love to look at the DVOA game projections that kind of look at expected based on what we've seen again and what we're expecting to happen. We're still too early in the year to fully just look at regular DVOA, but have more of the projection model. And this is one of the bigger differences between the spread and their expected point differential, almost 9 here versus the 5.5. So between all the things that I was thinking about looking through this list of games, I'm like, you know what, let's take a shot on this. It's Thursday night one. It could get weird, but I feel like it might get weird the other way where Dallas ends up blowing them out. I think that's as likely as the Giants covering. So maybe somewhere in the middle is where it actually ends up being, and we get the Cowboys winning. Watch this be the death nail. But hey, the perfect thing is if I miss this, my Eagles division pick is looking real good. So I kind of win on both sides. That's how I like to play this.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit better about making my swap to the Eagles after initially having the Cowboys as my pick for the division title. So, but it's early. Remember, we always say that it is early. Let's not overreact too much just yet. But there you go. We're both picking the Cowboys against the Giants. I don't think that's an overreaction at all. All right, our upsets of the week. As we said, we got several. Both of us do this week. And we're both going to go with this one, actually. Dylan will have a bonus upset. Well, actually, I said Dylan would have. We're both going to have 2 bonus upset picks here because we're both picking these as upsets, so we might as well talk about them here together. The Rams are at the Bears. The Bears are 3-point favorites in this game, which I don't know, Dylan. That just surprised me a little bit for the Bears to be 3-point favorites. But like you said, the Rams obviously have issues across the board in terms of injuries on offense. Defense has not been great. Meanwhile, the Bears have, at times been a bit of a mess on offense. Defense, though, has certainly, done some good things at times. So this is nothing more than I just don't have a lot of trust in either team. And I still think the Rams can do some things offensively to, kind of at least put up enough points to get a win here. And I'm still, just looking at this Bears offense and feeling like, hey, this is clearly a group that's still a work in progress with Caleb Williams. And even though the Rams have not been great on defense, I'll take a chance on them finding a way to sneak out a win here in Chicago.
This is the game where if the Bears win, it's going to be the moment where we see Caleb in this offense where they've been just off on a few plays, breakout. Obviously threw for a ton of yards last week against the Colts out of necessity because they couldn't run against a really bad run defense, which is a concern for me. But I'm going to kind of side on a couple of things. The coaching is probably the number one part where I do think maybe there's questions of with the way the Rams defenses look personnel wise, but also some of the things with the setup that you could question. But I do think that, we've seen this, a lot of the numbers show with the pressures that the Rams' young defensive line has been really good. They're just not finishing. And it's not going to be any easier after going from Kyler last week, the way the Purdy was able to escape a lot. Now you're facing another guy in Caleb. It's going to be just as hard and just as elusive. So we'll see. It might not be the week they get it done, but I do think they've done enough things with that pass rush and how they held up from a run defense point of view. When the Niners knew they needed to run the rock and the Rams were able to stop it just enough. And again, it comes down to also what we saw with the Bears last week against the Colts, not putting up an overly efficient performance. But I think also it's just that I do trust Sean McVay more than Matt Eberflus and the overall coaching staff in Chicago right now. There's times with this offensive line for the Bears in particular where it's not just they're getting pushed back, which could be a problem again with these young pass rushers, but also where they're either missing assignments on the next level. Brandon Thorne's kind of looked at some of that stuff. There was the one Latu strip sack where Mercedes Lewis has been a really good blocking tight end in his career. So I don't know if this is a coaching point or what, where he basically blocked Latu almost around Cole Kmet on a double team, like almost sped him up to get the strip sacks. There's some just weird things happening. Swift not seeing holes running the football. And even when there are, it's not like everything's gonna be perfect, but still making the openings aren't always there when they are, he's getting somewhat confused. So it just feels like a disjointed effort. I thought the Rams offensive line last week significantly better with Alaric Jackson holding down at left tackle. They have no tackle depth, but man, they have depth in the middle with the way that Logan Bruss and Bo Limmer. I've talked about Bo a few times. They're one of their, I believe, 6th round pick this year. That center has just been absolutely ridiculous to fill in with the play he's had so far. And then also Logan Bruss, who was, I think, a 3rd round pick initially, but didn't make the active roster last 2 years. And now he's here and looked quite good in the interior. So they figured some things out. They went with a lot more 12 personnel themselves with Colby Parkinson and Hunter Long. And Hunter Long was a blocking machine out there. Colby held up too, as well as a pass catcher. I think just the versatility. I have enough trust in that. It's kind of where it came down to. Also, Stafford is still dealing, and they're finding different openings and having different roles with, using when they do go to 12 personnel, only 2 receivers, obviously, but they're getting 4 guys involved. Whittington, more of a hybrid kind of in the run blocking and some of these lower crosser plays and physical runner. I think they started to kind of get some confidence. And I do think that this game could, if it goes the opposite way, it's going to be again because the Rams secondary and just overall not being able to get Caleb down. He's going to be able to buy more time and things break down. He's going to find some open guys. That could 100% happen. But Kyle Shanahan's a better coach, I think, than what the Bears are offering on the offensive side. So there's just some things where I need to wait and see it, and I think I have a little more trust. Even the Dave projection kind of has the not necessarily where they are right now, like you said, with the injuries and stuff that the Rams have, still question mark, but they have them 11 spots higher than Chicago, where they expect them to be by the end of the year. The overall projection for this game has the Rams winning, even if it's only slightly. So it's a 3-point favorite. Felt like a good spot to go at the upset, even if I usually like the pick against the Rams, and I can feel good one way or the other. Either get my pick right or the Rams win.
That's right. You're going to be a winner either way here. All right. This next one in the NFC South, the Saints are at the Falcons. The Falcons are favored by 1.5 in this one. Another interesting line, I think. The Falcons coming off of the loss to the Chiefs. Meanwhile, the Saints certainly had an interesting game against the Eagles. But I think this is another one where the line's so low here. Falcons getting a little bit of a nudge as the home team. But yeah, like this is another one where I've just kind of changed my opinion on a team from start to where they are now. And, I feel like I have a little bit more trust in the Saints being able to get the job done in the spots. Because I think too, think about how big of a game that was for the Falcons, home primetime game against the Chiefs, like what that means kind of in this era and because of what the Chiefs have accomplished and everything. And then to come up short, you could see maybe a little tiny bit of a letdown, perhaps from the Falcons here. But it should be a good game, and again, another game that probably game of the week worthy in terms of these two teams and seeing what you get here. But I'm gonna go with the Saints on the road in this one.
I'm going to say I'm pretty fired up for this one. I feel like it's been some time since we've had both teams look encouraging this way. Like, obviously there's a ton of Matt Ryan, Drew Brees matchups were a ton of fun. And this is we always talk about this rivalry itself and how much these teams really don't like each other. These fan bases don't like each other. So that all adds up. But also Atlanta, after that slow kind of start, maybe Pittsburgh looks a bit better, right, than we thought initially. And I think overall both these teams have early on shown some things, and the Saints also. I'm not looking too far into what happened last week, right? Like I know that there's some frustration, and Fangio has done this before with McVay years ago when he was the Bears defensive coordinator, just stifling that 2018 offensive attack. You saw that Clint Kubiak was doing a lot of outside zone, a lot of similar kind of ideas for what this offense was looking like, and then the Eagles completely snuffed that out. I don't know if Atlanta has the exact personnel to take advantage of that. They definitely have better defensive, definitely better safeties at least. And you've already seen both Simmons and Bates make tons of big plays. So that will be a different matchup than what we've seen even from the Eagles defensive back room. But I just think the Saints still have been the better team, even if the Falcons easily could have been 2-1 and beaten the Chiefs. I get why they're a favorite after that outing there in that game. I'm not looking too far, just the way that we didn't want to overreact too much to 2 weeks of Saints games. I'm not overreacting too much to their offensive performance last week. I think just overall their defense is kind of still on a level that I don't know that either unit from Atlanta has really reached. And I think has been better. I know the Chiefs defense, we've talked them up, but they're still more a borderline top 10 than top 5, the way that the Saints defense has been phenomenal so far. And I think it's going to be a day with some of the injuries the Falcons had in the offensive line too, not going to help with New Orleans' ability to generate pressure and collapse the pocket. And both these quarterbacks are guys that do not necessarily perform well like any QB, but especially two guys that really rely from operating from the pocket. When it crumbles in the interior, it is a problem. And I could see that happening a little more, I think, to Kirk than to Derek. So I'll go with the Saints here in an upset, even if this feels like maybe more towards a coin flip. But I don't know. I still think the Saints are just the better team. Same again with those projections. They have the Saints winning by over 3 points at FTN. So I mean, maybe this is the one to really nail down in terms of probably going to get decent odds with the Falcons as a favorite to just pick them outright to win.
All right, to our quick picks we go. The Broncos are at the Jets. The Jets 7.5-point favorites in that one. The Broncos are back, Dylan. At least they were with a big win at the Bucs. I mean, it was very impressive how they did it. I think it's going to be much harder to do that against this Jets defense, and that's why I'm picking the Jets in this game.
Yeah, I'm going with the Jets too. I thought, it was a quick week, right? But some people thought the Patriots might have more success against them than they did, and it ended up being just an onslaught. And I'm not same way that one game can happen. And I think we'll talk about the Bucs in a second. I just think that they didn't come out, and Baker talked about this afterward. They didn't come out ready to go. Like they thought, oh, we're hot. You know what? Like we're going to roll over these guys, and next thing you know, it goes completely the other direction. So I think the Bucs we'll get to the Bucs game in a second, but the Jets, in this case with the Broncos, I'm not expecting the Broncos to do that every week. I think the Jets defense is going to come out firing. I don't think they're going to have the similar letdown. They've had the extra long break after playing the Thursday night game. I think there's just enough encouraging things with that defense. I think especially with the pass defense, that I'm just not sure that Denver's going to be able to get cooking the same way they did. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I think it was maybe a game that showed like, all right, there's something going on here, but is it really going to work week to week? I don't know. I think the Jets are for sure the superior team. Considered it as a lock, but ultimately I think that half point, right? If it was 6.5, it would have been a little juicier. 7.5 makes it a little tough. Yeah,
makes it a little tougher to pick on that number. Speaking of the Bucs, the Eagles are 2.5-point favorites in Tampa to play the Bucs. And, I think this is where Dylan, weather starts to become a bit of a factor potentially in these kind of games. I don't know exactly what's going on. Obviously, there's a huge hurricane heading towards Florida. I don't know exactly. I think Saturday is sort of the time where you feel like it's supposed to be out of there. So maybe fine, but just something worth noting.
75%, I don't know, 40% precipitation Sunday. So we'll see. Maybe
we'll see. Lingering. Yeah. if that's the case, I'll tell you which team I have more trust in running the ball. It's going to be the Eagles than I do the Bucs. But this is kind of a rematch, a little bit of a revenge spot, I guess you could say, for the Eagles, coming off what happened in the playoffs last year. But yeah, that loss to the Broncos all of a sudden sort of just changed your trajectory for the Bucs, coming off of a huge win in Detroit. All of a sudden, you're thinking this team should be 3-0, but then they just lose a head scratcher at home. And now that I'm doubting them a little bit, and the Eagles are coming off a big win, I'm going to take the Eagles on the road.
Yeah, I'm going to go ride with Philly too. I really enjoyed what they did on defense for a 3-0 football game in the fourth quarter until things kind of went crazy. I thought it was wildly entertaining watching both sides and how they were attacking each other. Almost came out encouraged more by both teams than I thought I was even going in, which is kind of a weird thing to think. I don't think that they're going to have the same issues running the football here, as you mentioned. Tampa Bay has been a solid defense, but I'd say they're middle of the pack, could probably elevate a bit higher, but aren't exactly on the same level of New Orleans. And yeah, with the weather, like you said, and I think a Philly team that's rejuvenated a bit. And we saw they easily could be 3-0, right? And I think the bounce back from that really tough Monday night loss, the way that they did, was impressive, and to come away with it. So I do think, this is another game that has possible, like you said, there's a lot of possible game of the week kind of billings. I think that's a credit to what Tampa Bay has become. I think they will bounce back and play better. It's hard not to after what they looked like against Denver, but I just think I have a little more trust right now in Philadelphia. It's early. Things could still fluctuate. Maybe this is, we could be coming back here next week and be like that matchup's just not one that's playing in the Phillies' favor. But at least at this point, I think that they're a better football team. In a close game, I give them the edge too.
All right, on to the next one. The Andy Dalton revenge game part, whatever at this point, I guess. The Bengals are at the Panthers. The Bengals are 4.5-point favorites on the road in Carolina. And the fact that I even had to think about this as a potential pick of the Panthers tells you a lot about maybe where both teams are. The Panthers making the QB switch to Andy Dalton worked out really well last week against the Raiders. Meanwhile, the Bengals are staring down the likelihood based on stats of a team that is not going to make the playoffs, because we know what happens when you're sitting in the spot as they are, and at 0-3, not something that happens very often in terms of making the playoffs. What is it? I think only 6 or 7 teams, Dylan, that have made it since whatever the number is. So they could add to that, but it's got to start here. They can't lose this one. And so I'm going to pick the Bengals to win, but only being 4.5-point favorites on the road in this game, yikes, I would stay far away from this one.
And they've been pretty big favorites a couple times, right? And fallen in both those games to the Patriots and the Commanders. So the thing is that their offensive numbers are better than they've been, even in past years. Their success rate rushing the ball has been great. I know Washington's defense is not exactly a premier unit on defense, so you're going to look good against them. But overall, outside of that slow start against New England, and that defense is going to give a lot of teams problems. I do think that's one that really Cincinnati needed to get right with what we've seen happen. But the way that they looked against Kansas City, I still think this offense is going to be great. Their pass rush is all over the place for the Bengals, though. It's been like polar opposites when you look at Trey Hendrickson's X percentile of generating pressure per rush versus Hubbard and some of the other guys. I know they have injuries along the defensive line. So it's been a disjointed group. But I think against that Panthers defense that they looked much better against the Raiders offense that just can't get out its own way, especially running the ball. I'm not reading too much into that defensive performance from Carolina. I still think they have some problems that are going to allow Cincinnati to put up a big number. I don't think this is a team that's looking at this like we're down, and at least in terms of how it's going to impact their play. There's obviously going to be tons of frustration, but I don't think it's a team that's going to come out and mail it in this game. I think if anything, they're going to just really be desperate, and I don't know if that's a great place for a Carolina defense to come into this game. And yeah, Andy looked good, and maybe they'll put up some points, and that's why you're like, let's kind of hold back. But I don't know if some of the numbers don't really show that, like, all right, let's let's take a breather on this. There's some really high level or plays or 50-50 balls and kind of tough passes are hard to replicate week to week. We've also seen Cincinnati's defense look much better with the game plan and stuff than it did against Jaden. The things that Jaden presents as a problem are not presented by Andy, even if you do. And I was impressed, obviously, with what he's able to come in and do with that Carolina team after how they look. So I just think Cincinnati is still a vastly superior football team by the end of the year. I think that we'll see that with their record, and I think it starts here. So I'll go with the Bengals. And if I had to pick on the spread, I'm still picking them to cover. But like you said, it was just enough uncertainty to not lock them up here.
Boy, speaking of disappointments, the Jags on the road against the Texans. Texans are 6.5-point favorites in this game. The Jags also sitting here winless to this point. Of course, the most recent loss, just an absolute drubbing at the hands of the Bills. And so that made this, which if this number wasn't 6.5 and I wasn't like, at this point, just completely thrown off all my other betting locks, I may have actually made this the choice. But I told you, I said, one of the things I don't like about this game, this feels like one of your vintage AFC South, where did that come from type games. And I feel like that's a real possibility here, but I'm going to pick the Texans. I can't pick the Jags after seeing what they just did against Buffalo, because I could also see a situation where they are just, there's no coming back from that kind of performance, and they just get blown out here, and who knows what happens from there for Jacksonville.
Yeah, it does have that weird feel, right? I think like you said, there's been so many examples of all these teams. It's been like the Colts one year. It's been the Texans when they were the team that was on the downside, and they end up beating the Colts or the Titans or someone else that's actually in the division. So it's kind of every team's had their turn here. Did not expect the Jaguars to get here this quick. There's all the, I don't know if you saw the clip of their owner talking to the team. I think it was before the season, not between weeks 2 and 3, but about how this is the best Jaguars team they've ever had, and telling the players and coaching staff this whole speech, and for that to have gone the way it's gone, it's just been, it's got to be rough. And I'm wondering, in terms of hot seat situations, we might have an episode at some point mid-season to kind of check in on some of the storylines beyond just picks. But yeah, like I really am wondering how that team's going to respond. They also, I don't know if you saw the thing, or their plane had issues. They didn't get out of Buffalo till like 1 a.m. So it's been a fun time for this team now to go on the road to a Houston team that has not looked on offense especially as good as I thought, and a lot of people thought going into the year. They're 26 in offensive DVOA so far, which it takes into account your strength of your opponent. So it's weighted for those kind of things. It's not just that they're not getting it done against good defenses. They haven't been. Look at how they let the Bears kind of stay in that game. I know the Bears defense has been solid, but nonetheless hasn't been a perfect unit week to week. But I think they're capable of so much more. The Dave numbers show them being more like a borderline top 10 offense. I think that capability could start here. We just saw this Jags defense fold against the Bills. I think they'll come out firing a bit better, but I still think the Houston offense line can get some things going back. I think Joe Mixon's it looks like he's going to play. I really think they missed him in that game against Minnesota, against a team where they needed to be able to run the ball and they just didn't. So I think that Houston, they're the pick. There's a reason they're 6.5. I think the DVOA projection numbers have them winning by like 9. So it was close to like that mix of like, is this potential lock? But like you said, it's the AFC South wackiness. The thought that the Jags are still better, but man, if they get blown out in this game, what I they're still probably too early to make a change, but man, that it's really the pass defense for them has been a major problem. So I think that if you're a fantasy owner and been frustrated with some of the passing game from especially last week from Houston, I think this is a week where we might see it get going. I just wonder if they start 0-4 and lose this game by 2-3 touchdowns, what that vibe is going to be like. It's crazy. Lawrence didn't look good last week. He's been known to kind of fluctuate and bounce back, but he was really on a heater for a second last year before his injury and Christian Kirk's injury, and things have kind of just been downhill since. And their pass offense, even if Houston's hasn't looked perfect, it's been right there in a similar ranking. So, Houston's just still a better team. I think they'll win this game. If you're wondering why this wackiness could feel familiar, keep in mind that last year, September 24th, 2023, the Texans went into Jacksonville as 7.5-point underdogs. Yeah. And won that game 37-17. So that was the start of it. The trend has been set. Yeah. So again, the trend has been set to where maybe this is Jacksonville's turn to do the same. But
I don't know about that. Not with what I've seen at this point. All right. This game, as you said before we started recording, a lot more interesting than we ever thought it would be maybe in week 4. The Commanders at the Cardinals. Very exciting matchup between these two. 3.5-point favorites are the Cardinals in this one. That feels too high to me. Probably keep this at a field goal, but I told you I think the thing and the reason I'm going to pick the Cardinals in this one is this is definitely that potential letdown spot for the Commanders. Coming off that huge win on Monday night, Jaden Daniels just playing out of his mind right now, and making me rethink why did I not stick to my original strategy in fantasy football this year and wait to get a quarterback, and instead I went with Anthony Richardson way too early and picked Jaden Daniels instead. But I love this matchup, Dylan. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a red zone friendly game here. And yeah, I'm excited about this one, but I'm going to take the Cardinals.
In terms of real quick on fantasy, have not complained about having Josh Allen on one of my teams, but the other one I was going to try to get Jaden and waited just one round too long. Someone else also took him way earlier than he was expected. So that's been quite frustrating. That's a league where, I'm riding with Gino and Caleb on my bench until things get going. So we'll see how that really in a 14-team league is a little tougher. But for this game, I mean, excitement level for the level of quarterback play is really high. So in terms of red zone potential, this game has all sorts of possibilities and fantasy possibilities because both these quarterbacks are operating at a high level. I know there were some struggles consistently with the Detroit defense that, as we talked about, has improved, and they really, personnel-wise, are in a much better place than they were a year before. They stopped the run really well, which is something Arizona was doing well early in the season, and helping open up some things for Kyler with an offensive line that still isn't perfect, but they mitigate it with some of their game plan. So 2 pass offenses that have been in the top 7 in DVOA through the first 3 weeks. 2 quarterbacks operating at a high level. And just Jaden, man, I mean, the first 2 weeks looked solid, right? But there were flashes, but it wasn't pretty. They settled for, even though they won the game against the Giants, they settled for 7 field goals. I know there's a lot made of how they haven't punted or turned it over the 2 back-to-back weeks, not just this past week, but this past week, so much more impressive because of their ability to finish in the end zone consistently, all the 4th down conversions, and how cool, calm, and collected. I mean, he's just like a silent assassin out there, man. He's smiling and laughing while other folks there might be more frustration. He responds well to when things don't happen in his favor, and takes just a quick approach to fix his problems. And gosh, we saw this at LSU, right? The downfield accuracy and some of these shot plays, and everyone was begging for it as a Terry McLaurin fantasy owner in one league. I was very happy about some of the plays that occurred late in that game. But yeah, you saw the moments where this is what it can be. And like you said, though, letdown potential really high here against an Arizona team that has fought and battled. And even if the Detroit's offense hasn't looked pretty, they still held them to 20 points, right? I still think there's some impressive things to go from, but their pass defense for Arizona still ranks pretty low. So I think it's going to be a shootout. Never considered this as a possible lock, because I won't be surprised if the Commanders win. I went with you on the Cardinals, just a little more trust in the consistency. And I really do think the Commanders defense has some major issues that Arizona is going to exploit. Over-under wise, trying to real quickly, let's see, 50 and a half.
50 and a half, yeah.
Give me a 31-28 final. I think that could go over. I think it has the potential, because I do think these teams will score some points on Sunday.
I like that too. It's a great fantasy game. Get in on everybody, I think, in this game. Don't forget the Zach Ertz revenge game too. Even I was considering Zach Ertz this week, Dylan, in a fantasy spot. But that's what happens when you have Mark Andrews as your fantasy tight end right now, with the state of the
tight end
Ravens offense and the tight end position. So Cole Kmet, it's your turn. Oh, well, you're fine. Nice, you're fine. I'm going what I usually do. I feel like this has been the trend over the past 2 years, where you get that Cole Kmet huge game, and then you just all of a sudden jump on board, and what happens after that? We'll see. That's what I'm riding this week. I had the benchmark Andrews for Cole Kmet. We'll see if I get that one right. Most likely not. All right. The Patriots are the 49ers. Speaking of interesting fantasy games, 49ers are 10-point favorites home against the Patriots here. I don't love that. I'm going to be honest with you. Because, again, what are we getting from the 49ers offense here? Unless it's just the Juwan Jennings show again, which, as the fantasy trend continues, as a Brandon Ayuk owner and starting him ahead of Tyreek Hill, that's where things are right now for my current fantasy team. But I think this is one where I mean, Dylan, I guess the biggest thing here is like who's going to play, who's not going to play for the 49ers. We know a couple people aren't going to play. Debo, I think, is likely not to play. Christian McCaffrey, we know, is not playing. Purdy's been banged up a bit. I think Kittle's coming back. Is that right? Kittle should be good to go.
Let me see. I know, obviously, Hargrave being out for the year is a big blow for that.
Yeah, that one's another one. I mean, things are just fluid with this 49ers injury report right now. But it seems like they think they're getting Kittle back, or maybe I'm wrong on that. But I do think Debo is not supposed to be back as it sits right now. But nonetheless,
we're early. We're Wednesday right now, so we got
it's
some
Wednesday.
Time for these guys, yeah.
Either way, I think the Niners are going to win the game. They're going to be my pick, but I could see the Patriots being stingy enough on defense to at least make this interesting, maybe. And remember too, the Niners are coming off of just a very head scratching, disappointing loss to the Rams in the way that happened. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Niners start slow here, and maybe that gives the Patriots defense a little bit of confidence, especially if the Niners are shorthanded again. So I would not love this 10-point spread here, and was kind of surprised that it was this high, to be honest with you. But
yeah, it's some trust in where the Niners will ultimately end up, I guess. But their defense has not looked. I think my takeaway from the game wasn't even really. Obviously they're limited on offense, but I thought Brock had one of his better games of his career. I know the Rams defense is some major problems, but again, that defensive line generated a lot of pressure. He's able to spin out and find some guys, and sometimes they're wide open. Other times he was just making the right play, putting guys in a place to succeed. I thought he had a fantastic game. It was really the other side where the defense that we've seen dominate at times has been their 19th through 3 weeks in DVOA, and really defending the run. We saw them get exposed at times. So you do have those concerns that New England will, when things kind of get tough for that offense, that they're going to find a way to get some success on the ground. But I still think the Niners are just a superior football team, and enough places where, and if this game was in New England, maybe I'd feel a little different about maybe that spread would be a little lower. Obviously, probably more like 7.5 or something, but maybe 8. I still think the Niners are just a dramatically better football team. I think they're going to bounce back from these 2 losses, and I think they'll get right. And I do think they'll comfortably win this game, just because I do think New England, man, it really didn't look that great against the Jets. I know it's one game, and they almost beat Seattle the week before, and so. But I think also traveling across the country, I think there's something to the Niners getting back and playing with some urgency too. If they'd just escaped with the win against the Rams, maybe I'd feel a little differently. But I think they're going to come out firing, and this offensive line for the Niners is still a strength, and some interesting things that have happened. Yes, the running success hasn't, after that just ridiculous first game against the Jets, has not been there as consistently, but I do think that there's just enough pieces, even with all the injuries that San Francisco has, where I think there's just a better football team and are the pick, even if, shied away from any lock consideration.
All right, Dylan, your favorite game of the week, the Browns at the Raiders. Boy, I have no idea. The Raiders are favored by a point here. I think this is a pick 'em by every stretch of the imagination, given what we see from these two teams. Toss a coin in the air, Dylan. I'm going with the Raiders. You're picking the Browns. I don't really have a great reason. I don't have trust in either one of these two teams right now. Raiders coming off that game against the Panthers. Browns coming off a game against the Giants. I don't know that there are two teams facing each other in a matchup this week that are coming in about as deflated as these two are. So, yeah, curious to see what happens.
This has left me in a place out of all these games where I for some of the close ones where I didn't really still have a great feeling one way or the other and could see it going either way. This game, I don't have a good feeling because I just don't have a good feeling. Like it's a little different than I feel like, oh, this team could do this team could do this, and this and that. And it's like just deflating to watch the Browns at one point getting outgained by like almost 200 yards by the Giants. I don't know by the end of the game, it wasn't that drastic by any means, but they had obviously that quick touchdown after the fumbled kickoff, and then immediately score. And then after that, it was just all Giants for a while in that game. Just kind of rough to watch, obviously, the offense operate for Cleveland. But it's really been a defense that hasn't gotten close to the heights of last year yet. There's still a long way to go. And I still think by the end of it, where you kind of expect them to be, and Dave stat still projects them to be a top 5 defense by the end of the year. Right now, 19th. It just hasn't been perfect on that side, and that's not a recipe for success when you're not able to run the ball with the efficiency they have in pass. There's still some openings, but not anything like what we've expected from Cleveland with all the when Chubb was healthy, but then also some of the offensive lines that they've had in the past. It's obviously Deshaun has been the most. In the passing game has just been the roughest part. Outside of a few flashes here and there, the amount of plays that are missed and things are strikingly frustrating. You do wonder how long, even with the contract, even if they keep him on the team, do they just bench him? For the sake of other players, they might eventually have to go that route. We'll see if they lose this game. That's on the table because the Raiders, similarly came out and, man, talk about a team that is frustrating on offense, but more so when they're running the ball. It is them. And I know that Tampa going back to last year struggled to run the ball, but just in terms of frustrating to watch running games, when we see we're in an age right now, or at least a turn of the NFL cycle where there's such creative rushing attacks and so many fun things happening. And then you just watch the Raiders run game and I'm like, you should be better. You have guys, you have some fun players. And why is Alexander Mattison always on the team that's frustrating running the ball? But anyway, it's just been a tough team to kind of get a handle on. I do think that their defense, obviously last week after looking pretty good and holding up and getting pressure against the Ravens, just got completely boat raced. So I'm going with the Browns because I didn't really know where to go. And I told you, I was like, I'm just going to take whatever you don't take here. So we need some different game picks, right? So I'll go with Cleveland, but it's really one where at least for the Browns, I guess for the Raiders, I didn't have, and I still have there's still flashes that we talked about last week, how fun Brock Bowers looked and some of these things where there's some fun players and some things, but it's just still not, it's still all, it still looks a little disjointed. And maybe I just trust the overall that Stefanski will find a few things. We saw them I know the Jags are down, but we still found them find a way to win that game. Maybe we'll have a similar success in what should be not trying to be the major downer, but two teams I've just last week in particular was pretty disappointed with.
Well, we're not going to split picks on the next one. The Chiefs are 8-point favorites on the road against the Chargers. Of course, the biggest injuries are just, as we know, everywhere right now. And the biggest one, we don't know if Justin Herbert's going to play or not. That would obviously, and I think that number is probably built in here, certainly with the expectation that he won't play, but not been ruled out as of yet with the ankle injury. I know he's in a walking boot, but it seems like there is some optimism that he could play, but I don't know about that. We'll find out, though. Like I said, even if he does play, Dylan, he won't be at 100%. I can't imagine that being the scenario. So for all that said, the Chiefs are the pick here. And if he doesn't play, I just, I'm not sure what the Chargers do offensively at that point to try to match what the Chiefs can do. So.
Yeah, and both Slater and Joel got banged up against Pittsburgh. And, even if they do play, how does that limit things? I know Slater went back in and just did not look like himself for a few plays before they took him back out. So, that you already think about the strength of this offensive line was always going to be the tackles. Take that away, take Herbert away. Even if Herbert does play, if he's limited with his mobility, I feel like the safer thing is, I know it's Kansas City and it's frustrating because you started off hot and feeling like, oh, let's look at week 4, what's building that. Maybe we'll be 3-0, just like them. And now you're sitting here and wondering if it's even worth throwing them out there when you still have a long season ahead of you. Man, Kansas City has not looked perfect, but they're still 3-0. And it's like, well, when they get right, you're going to look back and be like, that was maybe the chance for someone to knock these guys off. But on defense, the pass defense has been here a hit or miss. I think the run defense has been something that I thought going into the year teams could exploit. They really showed up against Atlanta when they needed to. Obviously, some interesting play calls there at the end of the game. No threat of Kirk sneaking with his coming back from his injury probably didn't help things, but nonetheless, was impressed with some of the guys firing through some of those holes and overall what they're able to do stopping the run. But maybe a part of this team that still isn't in the place that you'd love it to be. But I think that match helps them. So like our preseason or even after a couple of weeks, I was like, maybe that's something the Chargers could exploit. Now I'm not so sure, and especially with the offensive line health, the Derwin James suspension, Bosa's injury, just a lot of injuries at really critical spots where there was no consideration for me to pick the Chargers here. Just a matter of how much Harbaugh can get these guys to fight and make it a game will be the ultimate question of what happens with the spread. But the Chiefs are who I think will win.
All right, another weird game here. The Titans are at the Dolphins. The Dolphins are favored by a point in this one. Man, I just, again, it's like the theme here. We don't know who's going to be the quarterback for the Dolphins. We know it's not going to be Tua, but Skylar Thompson was injured. Not sure if they're going to bring Huntley in off the practice squad. He played well, as we know, in Baltimore there for a stretch. Who knows? And so obviously that affects a lot of things, and that's probably why this spread is only a point in favor of the Dolphins. Meanwhile, on the other side, the quarterback play for the Titans has been terrible with Will Levis. I think just the mistakes have certainly been something that has stood out to this point. But yet this is a game there. It is a 1-point spread. And so basically a toss up here. I can't say I trust either team right now based on, again, their injuries and or limitations. But I'm going to go with the home team and pick the Dolphins. I think they find a way to get enough going, maybe with, the running game. Maybe Devin Achane breaks off some big plays. That's all I got, Dylan. I just think these are two teams that, again, also both very frustrated at where things are right now. And so Devin Achane is my X factor to win this game for the Dolphins.
What a Monday night appetizer. Last week, at least the Bills were able to kind of make it so we could, dial in a little more on one game. Here, we'll see. Probably we'll dial in more to Seahawks Lions in a second when we talk about that. But Titans have to be pretty frustrated. I think they should have at least a win. I think they've played I know that there's a lot of problems going on there, and it's frustrating, but they're probably played well enough to have a victory. Right now, Miami's the last in DVOA through 3 weeks, Tennessee 27. So we're not talking about two world beaters, but I think it's the biggest part for me. It's not just what this Dolphins offense looks like without Tua, but it's the defense has not looked nearly as good as I thought they would be capable of. Obviously they move on from Fangio, and there was some things with him not some of the friction overall with the culture, but man, their run defense is brutal. Also, it just hasn't held up either in the secondary too. I know they've had some opponents where it's been tough sledding, and Seattle's got a good passing game. Obviously, the Bills. So, and I don't know though. I just right now I'm a little more out, I guess, on what Miami's looked like. Then I still think the Titans are, like you said. Something could happen with Levis. It could throw it away. But we saw them, obviously, they won this game last year, and I thought there was a much bigger disparity between the teams at the time. That was also, I think, a split Monday night game randomly, Dolphins-Titans. But I'll go with the Titans here. Just the vibes with Miami. I really want to see them bounce back. And at this point, I think at least Tennessee can run the ball. Think about the old Oilers here, way before my time even. But I think they'll be able to. I think they at one place they can have success against the 31st DVOA run defense of the Dolphins, 11th in run defense, run offense DVOA for Tennessee. That's like the only. When you look at like either side of the ball, outside of special teams, so either side of the ball where there's an edge, that's the only unit on either side that's even close to not being in the bottom 5 through 3 weeks. So maybe that'll be an edge. The TVOA projection has Tennessee winning by 0.2. So I mean, they see this as like basically a coin flip. So I'll go with the Titans, and things getting rougher for my old AFC East pick there.
It's this is intriguing for a lot of reasons. I don't know that it'll be the best game, but yeah, whoever wins this game, it's going to be something to see what we're talking about with the other side. All right, Seahawks at the Lions. Lions 3.5-point favorites in this game. Again, this should have been probably considered as one of our games of the week. It would have been if we didn't limit it to 2 spots. But yeah, this should be a lot of fun too. I know what the Seahawks have accomplished at this point, but I like the Lions better in the spot in Detroit, and so should be a great game. But give me the Lions.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think part of me wanted to pick Seattle, and it's partially because I don't think the Lions have looked exactly like where they're going to be. They're far from a finished product, but the defense has made enough strides where I think they'll have some success. These teams have played some really fun games the last couple of years. I think Seattle's gotten the better of them, but it's just been obviously a very different Seahawks team, but they've played some high-scoring affairs. I don't think we're going to have that because we have, at this point, early on, the number 2 DVOA defense and number 9, 2 with Seattle, Detroit at 9th. I think both sides, what Mike McDonald's been able to do with that team, even if you wonder about, I know Byron Murphy had an injury. I'm not sure of his status. I'd have to look that up at the moment, but that would be a big loss for them. But I think they're just, even if there's not like there's some places where like maybe the talent level isn't exactly where you ultimately want it to be. I think they have one of the more underrated pass rushing duos, and Mafe. These guys are generating pressure and causing some problems. The secondary's held up well. And the big thing is they just, compared to past years, this team's tackling, like, guys are not getting by these guys. They're stopping dudes in their tracks. So it makes for a team where Detroit prides themselves, right, on their ability to run after the catch. And a lot of their offense in the passing game is not necessarily, there are some downfield shots, but there's a lot of throwing short of the sticks and running past them at times. So I think that it'll be an interesting matchup, and one that, I think, like you said, this had true game of the week. This is I won't be shocked at all if this is a wild card or a divisional round playoff game at the rate things are going. Like you said, too early to get ahead of ourselves, but two teams that I picked both to make the playoffs, and I think I may have, even in my, forget exactly how I broke down the matches, might have had this as a wild card match. It feels like it has that kind of potential. It's the other side of the ball too, with Seattle's offense has looked really good. They've been able to, run. They're still the top 10 in run offense efficiency, which was maybe more of a question mark than others parts. And it's so crucial they do that because the offensive line is still the one part, at least pass blocking, that you have questions about. But Gino's been able to operate. We saw it last year, and now there's more answers than he had, and they're getting into less of the long third downs than they've done under Waldron. I think Grubb's done a good job early on. So you know what? I'm actually going to flip my pick. We need three different ones. I'll go Seahawks here instead of Lions. I'm talking myself into it. Yeah. I think the Lions, there's a reason I had the Lions first. I think probably would have, and this would probably flip this up to an upset. I still think there's definitely a world where the Lions, we start seeing it all come together, and I think there's a world where Aiden Hutchinson just wrecks this. He's been wrecking backup offensive linemen, and I think, as he should. That's what a sign of a good pass rusher. I think even against starting guys, he's going to have a lot of success, but I think there's a world where he does disrupt, and that's the difference. But I just think the balance of what Seattle's done, I'll just go with a shot in the dark here. Let's get, it's been that kind of season where these are the games that flip. And so I'll go with Seattle. Unfortunate for my Rams here to pick the Seattle to get the 4-0, but that's how it goes with when you're a team that right now is operating in a top 5 level on both sides of the ball. We'll see if it maintains, but that's the thing with those Dave projections, again, that are not kind to certain teams. Like, you'll look at teams like the Chargers, where they've started out really well, right, on defense, and they have them being more of a middle of the pack group by the end of it. Seattle, they believe this is for real. They still have them right now. If they had to look at where they think by the end of the season they'd be as a top 4 team, that's Detroit at 7th. So, that's where you talk about game of the week kind of stuff, obviously, where they are right now. But maybe is one thing, but that just shows how good that defense has been, man, for Seattle. I've had fun riding with them at different times in fantasy. I'm not sure about this week against Detroit, but I really do have a lot of faith in what McDonald's been able to quickly do with that group and some of the overhaul and the personnel. Just a really fun team. And I think that if they do win this game, it's going to be, right now they're kind of being slept on. Teams where people are talking about all the 3-0 teams and throwing out how impressive the Vikings have been, the Steelers have been, and I think they have, and obviously the Bills and Chiefs, but maybe they're being slept on a little too much for me. I think Seattle is a really talented team, and this could be like you said, borderline. If we had 3 games of the week, it for sure would have been in there.
Yeah, I think this will be really good. And yeah, like we said, a lot of really good games, I think, on the card. I feel like you got a pretty even split this week, where games just look like they could just be a mess, but you've also got a lot of games that I think are going to be very interesting for a lot of reasons. So, yep, we'll see how it all plays out this week in the NFL. But of course, still on lots of stuff over at Clutch Points to get everybody ready for the upcoming weeks. So everybody know where they can find that.
Yeah, you can go to clutchpoints.com to our NFL section and our fantasy sports section on the top nav bar. Tons of predictions for these games, player by player, some analysis from a fantasy point of view that we're doing this week. Looking at the start 'em, sit 'em kind of advice that we've got going for a while. Obviously, all the injury news and all the trash talk leading up to some of these games worked out decently well for Cam Britt in week 2 against the Chiefs after he talked some trash. Not so much when he called Cliff Kingsbury's college offense with Jay Daniels last week with the Commanders. But yeah, all that you can find in the NFL section, in the fantasy sports section at clutchpoints.com, and then also the NFL section of the Clutch Points app.
Yep, check it all out there. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Any podcast app you use, search for Establish the Pass. And thanks as always for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the Establish the Pass podcast.